Hello out there. My name is Ashley Bright of Ashley Bright Presents. As some of you may know, I've been attending a lot of conferences and workshops lately, and people have asked, well, hey, how are the presentations? What do you think? What's good, what's bad? So I thought I'd start giving little critiques on some of the presentations I've seen, some of the good, some of the bad. Hopefully we can learn from it. And with that in mind, I want to say that since I'm going to be naming names here, so the people that are presenting, I'm going to name names. I want to just put it out there, this is sort of constructive feedback. I want everyone to learn from this. We can all learn from each other, sharing ideas, and so no criticisms that are, I'm not trying to bash anyone, I just want us all to learn and grow and create great presentations that sell our ideas and communicate with our audiences. So with my little disclaimer out of the way, let's get rolling. So I'm looking, if you keep seeing me looking down, I'm looking at the program from the recent conference I was at. It was the Arizona Entrepreneurs Conference up in Phoenix just last week. Number of really great speakers, really great people, really smart people, and so I wanted to provide a little feedback and talk about who's doing good stuff, who could do a little help, etc., etc. So I'm just going to kind of roll through these. I'm going to be relatively quick. You can always follow up with questions or send me anything that you need me to clarify on. So first up of the day was a woman named Aly Saxe, who had the Launch Company of the Year last year, Iris PR. And I don't know, it was because the first talk of the day, the caffeine hadn't kicked in or what, but I don't remember a lot of great detail. But the things I do remember is that Aly, you know, she was up on stage, she was very comfortable, she had very simple, clean slides. She spoke to the audience from a standpoint of understanding their needs. So it's all entrepreneurs, we're all looking for suggestions, we're looking to learn and what are the pain points. And she covered some of those. She talked about how she came up with the solution for her company and how it worked. So relevant to the audience, comfort on stage, simple and direct slides. Those are the keys, and Aly had those. Now, as I said, I don't remember a lot about it specifically, and maybe that's just because I'm not in the PR space, so it wasn't necessarily resonating directly with me. But for what it's worth, didn't really jump out at me. So take that for what you will. Maybe that has to do with presenting something that is a little bit more in a surprising or memorable way, potentially. There weren't many hooks, maybe, that I remembered, so I'll leave that alone. I won't get into too much detail there, but that was my first impressions. Next up was David Morrell. Right, so I've subsequently learned that it was Bill Rinehart that was on stage, not David Morrell. The program had changed. My bad. Sorry for the confusion. And he's a Chief Strategy Officer for Unicorn Media. Now, he got up there, he didn't have slides or a big presentation, he just got up behind the podium and kind of winged it, which for him I think worked well. He was speaking off the cuff, it was more of a discussion, question and answer kind of a thing. And he as an individual has a fairly good presence on stage. He's tall, he's a broad guy, and so he can get away with that. Not all of us have that, that ability just by standing there. But he did, and I think that worked well for what he was doing, and he was able to answer questions directly and really own the space, and so I think that worked for him, and I think people got a lot out of it. Next up was Pat Sullivan. New to me, I wasn't familiar with Pat, but he's a longtime entrepreneur, I guess going back into the 80s. He's had a number of companies, and he was pretty well known to most of the people kind of in the crowd there. He's an individual, he's used to selling, he's very comfortable up there, and that was evident right from the start. He had great body language, he was humorous and comfortable up on stage. He did have slides and some prepared things he was showing, but it was a little bit more off the cuff. Now, with that in mind, it felt a little bit that way, and not always in a good way. The off the cuff is fine, but it tends to meander. The presentation kind of meandered around a little bit, and I don't know if it was direct as it could be. The other big thing, and I heard this from some of the people I spoke to in the lobby afterwards, that it felt very much more like a product demo rather than something that was sort of speaking to the audience in something they're interested in, which is sort of, as an entrepreneur, what are the challenges you faced, what are the struggles, what are the things you'd recommend. There was little hints of that, but by and large it felt a lot more like a product demo. And I think that's just because Pat Sullivan's new product, Contatta, is about to go into the market, and so I think he's in that sell mode. And I mean, the product is beautiful and looks really great, but I don't know how relevant it was necessarily for the topic that people were there to discuss, which was entrepreneurship. So it is what it is. I won't sort of beat that one over the head, but you know, in closing on him, I mean, you know, comfortable on stage, he used humor, He engaged with the audience, which is great. And he did have, you know, good visuals and good slides. I just question the overall relevance of the whole thing as it related to the audience. So that's my little pick on that one. So next up was Rebecca, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce her last name. She's the Senior Director of Communications at Infusionsoft. She actually got up on stage and acknowledged the challenge of her name, and so she pronounced it for everyone, so I appreciate that. But so Rebecca, I mean, Rebecca I think had one of the better presentations of the day. She had obviously rehearsed it. She was very aware of what the audience was and their interests, and so she spoke to that. It wasn't a sell or a product demo by any means. It was very much sort of talking about how their product works so well with small businesses, and so what the bulk of her talk was about was the actual small businesses that they work with. She had beautiful imagery of the individuals that they work with across the country, all variety of small businesses. She had some really great simple slides showing how they're using marketing media, whether they're using social or they're using SEO or whatever that is. And she spoke about the passion that they had for what they did and how they connected with their customers. So points like that are very relevant for this entrepreneurial audience. They want to learn how to connect with customers, how to get new customers, etc. And so I really liked Rebecca's presentation. Just, as I said, great slides, great simple visuals, really on point, very relevant to this audience. She felt very comfortable, or appeared to be very comfortable up on stage, and her talking points and delivery were well rehearsed. So really great presentation from Rebecca, and I think one that was sort of a standout for the day. Next up was a woman named Scarlett Spring. She's president of VisionGate. And I enjoyed her talk as well. All the different speakers, you know, being entrepreneurs, they're coming from a place of passion. Most of them, similar to myself, have left corporate gigs and they're striking out on their own. And so with that, I think comes that inherent passion and drive that you have to succeed and test yourself. And Scarlett was no exception. She had a great story about her background in big pharma and her life in corporate culture and how she decided that she needed to push herself, and so VisionGate was kind of the result of that. And I think, you know, she had a great presence on stage. She appeared to be very comfortable. She had a good voice. She moved around the space. Obviously, she's got a background in presenting and working with clients, and so she felt comfortable doing that. One of the things that I saw that was probably the biggest issue with hers, and actually I spoke to her afterwards in a complimentary way, but sort of pointing this out, was that the visuals and her slides that she was showing were not doing a very good job of really supporting her story. They had a lot of text on them that was hard to read and just overwhelming. The diagrams were sort of typical PowerPoint arrows and things pointing all over the place and confusing. And it was unfortunate because I think her passion, her delivery, her presence were all very positive, and the work she's doing at VisionGate could be revolutionary for the medical field, but the visuals that she was using to support that were just falling short. And so, you know, something to learn. You can have all these things figured out, but if your visuals aren't doing a good job supporting you, then it can really impact the overall success and value that people are getting out of your talk. So something to keep in mind. All right, so let's see, moving on. After lunch, there was a woman named Gloria Feldt, who's the co-founder of Take the Lead, Propelling Women to Leadership in 2025. I unfortunately missed the vast majority of this. I was late getting back from lunch, but the 10 or so minutes that I saw, it was very clear that Gloria had great stage presence. She moved around very comfortably. She was able to use her voice and use her gestures to really engage with the audience and project her voice and get them sort of pique their interest. Her slides were very simple and straightforward, you know, no more than a few bullets per slide, and just her passion, her presence on stage, and her simple slides, I think made for a really memorable and powerful presentation. So that was a good one as well. I'm kind of moving down my list here. We sort of went out of order as I remember it, so anyone who was at the event, these may be slightly out of order. I apologize. I'm just going to go by the schedule that was here. So next up was Danielle Janitch, who is from Osborn Maledon law firm, and she was talking about privacy and legalese and things that you need to put on your mobile apps. So potentially fairly dry stuff, but very relevant to anyone who's in this entrepreneurial space doing mobile apps. As you'd expect with legal, it's all about legalese. We like our legalese, lots of text, lots of text. That existed, of course. I mean, her thoughts were very well organized. The presentation was very straightforward, so she'd obviously thought through what she was going to talk about and made it relevant to the audience. Even with the dry subject matter, she did find opportunities for a little bit of humor and levity in terms of just some of the complexity that does exist in the legal language, and so she made light of that, which is always good. I think that's tapping into where your audience is at, where they may be a little overwhelmed, and you're acknowledging that. Her slides were well organized, but you know, as you'd expect, too much text on them. She used a background pattern that created some legibility issues with her text on screen. So that's something that could have been addressed. And even though she did interject some humor, I think there could have been some opportunities for maybe a little bit more levity, a little bit more playfulness in what she was doing. But I think that's asking a lot of a lawyer, just from my experience. So anyway, but it was what it was, and I think valuable information. Like I said, well organized and to the point and relevant, but just a little bit sort of falling short, I think, on the visuals, needed a little less text on the screen. So next up was Heidi Jannenga. She's co-founder of WebPT. This was another really great talk. I think because it was coming from a place of honesty, a place of passion. She and her husband had devoted, you know, the last 3 or 4 years to this project, injecting their own money, working double jobs, etc., etc. But it was because something they really felt passionate about, and that came through. Heidi had good, comfortable presence on stage. She interjected aspects of their personal experience, which I think is always valuable when you're speaking to an audience about any subject, because what that personal experience. It kind of lets your audience in. It creates sort of common ground, if you will, because your audience, they want to know how to make their best business successful. They want to know how to overcome hardships. And so for you to talk about the things that you struggled at and the things that you had to overcome, it creates common ground and brings them in. And so Heidi did a great job of doing that. Her slides were very simple and straightforward. They were definitely more sort of scenery. Which is great. I think that's what you want. If you're up there speaking, you want your slides to be background scenery so that your audience is focused on you. And so I think Heidi did a great job of that. Really simple slides, comfortable on stage. She revealed personal stories and personal challenges that her and her husband had faced on their road to success. And so I think that was a very relevant and good presentation for the group to hear. All right, a bunch of other stuff. We got a busy afternoon here. So next up was Dan Gillmor. Dan Gillmor is the director of the Knight Center for Digital Media Entrepreneurship at ASU. And so I don't know of Dan, but he was known. People knew of him at the conference, and he's an academic, teaches at the university, and I'm sure he's been doing that for many years. And so to a certain extent, as you'd expect, it felt a little bit that way, a little bit sort of dry, reserved delivery. Which part of it I think is probably he's done similar talks to this many times before, and he teaches day in and day out, and also just his personality, and you know, and that's fine. If that is your personality, bring it forward. With that said, Dan did a great job of injecting some humor into what he was talking about and making light of some of the points. His slides were very straightforward, not a lot of text on them, nice simple visuals to support what he was talking about, which is really the key. From a design standpoint, because I'm a designer, I think they could have been a little bit more well-designed or a little bit more quote-unquote beautiful, or excuse me, maybe visually pleasing, but I think that's splitting hairs. I think the net was that I think he had the right balance of very simple visuals supporting what he was talking about. He felt comfortable up there, as I would think he would be, because he does this day in and day out, and little bits of humor just to kind of keep it light and not have it be too much sort of like, you know, boring lecture, because we've all been there, we've all been sat through those sorts of things, and that's not really fun. So Dan did a good job, I think, of sort of presenting it in an interesting manner. Next up was Lisa Stone, who's the co-founder of BlogHer. Wow, great energy. She brought her personality to the forefront. Really had this great energy up there. Obviously a lot of passion in what she's doing. She moved around the stage very comfortably. Her slides were very simple and straightforward. One of the things she had, which a few others had, but she had more than others, was really sort of clearly delineated pain points, things that she overcame, ways to address problems that are, I think, very common in the entrepreneur space. So she was being very aware of her audience and making points that were very relevant to them. And I think the little sort of sound bites, if you will, or little kind of lists that she had on her slides talking about the things she'd learned, the things she'd overcome, the challenges or recommendations that she had were great, because this audience can quickly jot those down or snap a photo, and they can now go back and use that in what they're doing. So really helpful. I think that's key. You know, you got to keep your audience in mind. You got to know where they're coming from and make what you're talking about relevant to them. And so I think between what she was saying, the energy she was bringing to it, the passion that she had for it, and the simplicity and content of her slides were really effective, I think, at connecting with the audience. And so that was really great. That was excellent. After her, there was a panel discussion, which was actually a good change of pace. I think this we're getting to the mid to late afternoon. The energy levels kind of dropping a little bit in the group, and so I think it was good they switched it up. So there were 4 people on the panel. They had sort of questions that had been predefined for them. And so it was a little bit different format. There was a bit of a negative, and this was really more of a time crunch aspect, because the agenda had been sort of messed around the afternoon. They had to kind of rush through this in order to get the other people in, and so you could tell from some of the speakers that were up on the panel that there was more they wanted to say about a particular question or a topic, but they had to kind of move on. So that was not ideal, but the format was good, and I think they touched on some valuable stuff. It was a cross-section of different people that had different types of businesses and had struggled in different areas of entrepreneurship, as we all have, and had some good points to share about that, and I think people got some value out of that. Let's see, who's up next? So last 2 speakers, and I think actually this next one probably preceded some of these. I think they went out of order, but his name is James Archer. I've seen him speak before. He's the founder of a design firm called 40. And he, another really good presenter, good presentation. You could tell he'd either done this before or rehearsed it quite a bit, because it had a really good flow and the points were organized very well. And he was using visuals in his slides to really support that what he was talking about. He did something that some of the others did, but he did it right from the beginning, which was start with a story. He started talking about the history of a particular company, a client he'd been working with, and they had a 190-year history, and so he talked about that, and it really it was a poignant story, and he purposely sort of structured it in such a way that it kind of set up where he was going with it, and it pulled the audience along. And so that's a really critical thing that I haven't really spoken to yet, is injecting story. Everything has a story, whether it's a personal story from your standpoint as the presenter, whether it's a story about how the information or data you're presenting is relevant to your audience or has a human perspective, how it impacts, benefits, positives, negatives. Those are all stories that can be told in all ways to get people engaged and get them hooked. Okay, so don't overlook story. So in closing on James, I mean, really solid visuals, really simple, which I would expect. He's a visual person. His topic was relevant to this audience. He had good stage presence. He used story well to get the audience engaged and keep them moving through and following along with him. So really good stuff there. And then last but definitely not least, and this is a tough one, end of the day after a full day conference, the last speaker of the day, and there was going to be, after the speaker, there was going to be free wine and drinks out in the lobby and an opportunity for more networking with people. And so that's a tough slot to fill. Energy levels are down, people are kind of nodding off, or they're anticipating like being able to get out there and have a few drinks and relax. And so this was a tough slot to have, and so big kudos to Alisa Sherman, she runs the Wine Sisterhood. And I mean, oh my God, she was great energy, great presence on stage. She really had this voice that just kind of was booming and connecting, and I ascribed it to someone afterwards. I said it was kind of like bright lights being shone in your face to kind of wake you up towards the end of the afternoon. So it was great. She had, as I said, great presence, great energy, passion, talking from the heart. And then her slides as well. She had great supporting material that was very relevant to this audience. She talked about mentorship and the value of mentorship when you're starting a business and you need advice and you need input. No one else had talked about mentorship, so very relevant and really great for people to hear. It was also super important because the timing of which people were hearing about mentorship, she was pushing, you know what, when you go out there and you have some wine and you relax and you talk to people, talk about mentorship, ask for a mentor, feel comfortable putting yourself out there, which I think was super important for this audience. So very relevant. So a really great way to close out the day. All right, so that's kind of everyone. I rolled through this fairly quickly. I hope it's been useful. The key things that I took away from this is, you know, as a paramount, know your audience. Whatever you're going to talk about, make sure that it's relevant to them. Okay, remember, your audience is the hero, not you. Okay, they came to hear something, they're taking time out of their day, so make sure what you're talking about is relevant and has value for them. Okay, when you're talking about data, you're talking about information, look for a way to give it a human connection. How does that data, how does that information impact a human? How does it impact your audience? How did it impact you as the speaker? Okay, always tie it back. Integrate story. Some of that, you know, bringing meaning to data comes from story, but use story. Everything has a story. It doesn't matter what it is. So you can always interject story to help bring your audience along to help you get engaged. Visuals. Keep them simple. Very limited text on screen. It should only be supporting. There should be no reason that you should be reading anything off your slides, nor should your audience be reading things off your slides. They should be focused on you up there, presenting, telling your story. Okay? If you are using visuals, keep them simple. Okay? Nice big bold photography, simple graphics and diagrams. Okay? Don't get complicated. If it's too complex, your audience is focusing on the screen and not on you. If it needs to be complex, then it should be a handout. It shouldn't be up on the screen. Okay? And then body language. Move around the space. Speak to the different sides of the audience. Make everyone feel that they're being included in the conversation. You know, use your hand gestures sparingly, but you want to get comfortable in the way you use them. A lot of this part where it comes to actual delivery just comes from doing it and doing it and doing it, okay? Because you need to bring your own personality forward. And if you're sort of all nervous and clenched up, or you're trying to be like someone else and be all wild and crazy, but it's not you, it's going to feel that way. It's going to feel contrived, and that's going to turn your audience off. So just practice, practice, practice. Give lots of presentations, get comfortable, and bring your personality forward. And you know what? A lot of people don't talk about this, but when you get up on stage, have fun. Okay, that's what it's all about. Your audience is there to learn from you. You're there to learn from them. It's all a give and take. It's sharing. So go up there, have a good time, be excited about what you're talking about, love what you do. Okay, so I'm going to get out of here, but thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions about presentations or anything else, feel free to drop me a line. I'm on all the regular networks, or you could even pick up a phone and call me. I know, crazy. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks very much for your time. Good luck with your presentations. Have fun.